Hi everyone, Phil Ingram here from tellatek.com, and we're continuing from our basic Webflow to WordPress tutorial. If you haven't yet seen that, I've included the link in the additional notes area just below this video, as well as the updated zip archive of the files that we're going to modify today. Now that we've set up our basic theme, the one final thing that's left to do is to make it compliant. WordPress ships with the latest stable version of jQuery, which also happens to be the same version that our Webflow export included. However, that may not always be the case, and the way that we've included it in our footer.php is not necessarily compliant with WordPress standards, and it may not allow other plugins to properly detect the inclusion of jQuery or maybe even access the library. So what we're going to do is we're going to set it up to where our WordPress or our theme functions.php calls our style sheets and our scripts. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that. And you may have noticed that I've changed the theme from Webflow to metric. It just made more sense since we essentially converted from the metric template. So I just simply renamed the folder, and I changed a couple things in the files so that our theme now references the name metric instead of Webflow, and of course updated the rest of the files in the opening area to also reference that name. You can make your theme whatever name you want. You just need to make sure that the style.css file references that name as well as elsewhere throughout the theme files. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is go ahead and copy all of these style sheets and scripts from our header.php. So we'll go ahead and actually just cut those out. And what we're going to do is create a function in our functions.php that will allow the WP head to call these scripts and style sheets. So we'll go ahead and open up functions.php, and we'll just temporarily paste what we cut out there so we have something to reference. And then I'm just going to copy this, and we'll call it register our scripts and styles here, just so this is just comments that actually don't appear on the front end of our website, but kind of tells us what we're doing when we reference our functions PHP. This file can continue to grow as we add functionality to our theme, but we're just going to create a new function. We'll call it let's just call it metric underscore dependencies, and the way that we're going to add this to our theme, we will use an add action hook. And the first item here, the first attribute of this is going to be what is going to call this function, and then of course we're going to provide the function name of what to be called. So these are the two arguments. So the first argument here is going to be WP underscore enqueue underscore scripts, and the this action will get called in when the WP head is called. So and then of course when this action is called, it is going to reference this function and do whatever we supply in this function. And so the first one is going to be our style sheets. So we'll go ahead and run the WP enqueue style, and I'm going to give it a unique name. We'll call it metric Webflow style. And we're using the style sheet directory, which the style sheet directory will always reference your currently active theme, but it will also reference if you're using a child theme, whereas specifying the get template directory will always reference the parent theme. So we'll go ahead and put our path to this file. right there. And there's 5 arguments that can be supplied here. So the first one is the unique name. The next one is the path. The next one is our dependencies. And then we have version. And then last but not least, our attributes. For example, the style sheet attributes of what those styles will apply to, whether it's the screen or print, and of course we can leave those out and it'll just follow the WordPress default values. So now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and add our second style sheet, and we'll call this the metric theme style, and this one will be just the style.css. So we can go ahead and get rid of these 2 references right there. The next one's a script, and we'll just go ahead and copy this, but we'll make a slight modification right here. So we're going to enqueue a script, and this one we will call it the web font. And then over here, JS webfont.js. Now this also has 5 arguments, or will take or receive 5 arguments. So we have the unique name, we have the path, dependencies, version. The last one is a true or false, which will default to false, and this is whether or not we load in the footer or the head. So true will be called when the WP head action, we'll just put that here, and this will be WP footer. So that way we can control where this is going to go. So with this one, we don't need any dependencies, and since there could be multiple dependencies, we would pass an array over to this, but I'm just going to do an empty array. We're going to set this to null for our versioning. That I typically, while I'm developing the theme, is I'll use, I won't include the version. It can cause some problems with style sheets if you include the version with your style sheet and you make changes to it, but the version doesn't change. The browser will reference the same version, so it'll just load whatever you have in your cache potentially, and maybe you won't see your edits. So a lot of times I'll leave the version out until the very end. And then last but not least, we want to say that this is going to be loaded in the head, so we'll say false. And let me reverse these here. That's the way that's supposed to be. Well, that's not good. Okay, I had to take a moment and fix that. I got logged out right in the middle of doing some work on this. So we're going to go ahead and just continue on. And so the next thing is going to be another style sheet. And this is great because we get to use this example where we have an external style sheet. And we will call this gfonts. We'll copy this URL, and in this case we don't need a reference to our style sheet directory, so we'll just reference the URL directly, and we're going to go ahead and remove the HTTP from the front of this as well, so that way if we ever get an SSL certificate for our website, it won't matter. If the site is loaded with the HTTPS, it will load this with an HTTPS as well. And we'll come in here and change this. Q style. Okay, actually that's good. The next one here is an inline script, and this script is going to be dependent on whether or not the web font JS is loaded. So we're going to do something a little bit different with this one. So let's just skip it for a moment, and we'll come back in and enqueue our style enqueue another script, and boom. This one will be our modernizer, so we'll call it modernizer script, and we'll copy the path like so. And in this one we'll also have loading in the header area. Alright, so let's do something about this inline script. So what we're going to do is just create another function, and we will call this metric load web font. And what we want to do is close the PHP and then open it back up. So we basically opened our document with the PHP interpreter all the way to here, and then we're back to normal HTML, and then we're opening it back up again. So now we can take this HTML, essentially HTML tags, HTML script tags with our JavaScript, and we will just paste it in there like that. And we'll use a statement called add action again, but this time we're just going to say when WP head is called, we are going to call this function right here. And we're going to also we want to make sure that the web font script is loaded before. So what we want to do is say if, and let's go ahead and close that if statement. Alright, and on this one what we will say is if WP underscore script underscore is, this is where we can check if a script is loaded or not. And what we'll do is the first argument references the unique script registered name. So go ahead and paste that right there. And then the next value is we want to make sure it is done. So that should give us what we need there. So now we have a few more things. At the very end in our footer we have a couple scripts down here, so we'll grab both of these. Actually what we'll do first is we'll take this conditional and we'll make sure, since it's loading after these and we're going to move these to be called with WP footer, we'll just go ahead and move that right below it there. And now we'll cut these out. And we'll go back to our functions PHP, and we'll continue on with our initial action here. And what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and copy this, but we're going to change this very last argument, and we're going to make it true. So we're going to tell it to load in the, or actually we'll just correctly say load with WP footer. And what we'll do is we'll copy this path here. Actually we're gonna kill two birds with one stone. I'll show you this. We're gonna come in here and we're gonna copy the path of our Webflow.js like so. And in our dependencies, since WordPress comes with jQuery and it is registered with the simple name of jQuery, we can actually load both of these scripts, and in this order exactly. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in and say metric Webflow script will load with a dependency of the jQuery library. So it's going to load the jQuery library first and then load this our Webflow script like so. And then there is one thing that we need to change in our Webflow script. And I've already gone and done this. It basically, when WordPress loads the core jQuery library that it ships with, it does it in a way that the $, which references the jQuery object, is in a what's called no conflict mode, meaning there might be other libraries that use the $, for reference. So WordPress removes that, and we would reference anything with jQuery just by simply using jQuery. But and what we would have to do is essentially look for every reference of that in the Webflow document and change it to jQuery. Well, here we can actually just reinstate the $. If anyone has a better suggestion on how to go about that, feel free to mention it in the comments. But by setting that up, go ahead and save our footer. We'll go ahead and save the functions PHP, and we'll go ahead and save our header, and then we'll go ahead and check out our site. So let's go ahead and refresh the page, and hopefully everything looks good. Let's see, smooth scrolling. Alright, sliders working. We can inspect the code here, and let's see, we can see in the head information, here's our inline script, and we can see here's the web font JS modernizer. If we scroll further up, we can see here's the Google fonts that we loaded. We got the style sheet here, the Webflow CSS. It looks like we got all our libraries. Here's our scripts and our style sheets, and we can see jQuery is being loaded right there just by simply supplying that one statement in that dependency array. And if I had multiple libraries that I wanted to call, I would just separate them with commas and simply request those. So we're in good shape. So again, if anyone has a better way of reinstating that $, variable to essentially reference the jQuery object, I'm all ears, but that seems like the simple solution for now. So anyway, that's that. I think the next tutorial we'll talk about maybe taking some of these sections and breaking those down into either shortcodes or personally I like widgets because they're not going to get filtered by the WordPress auto, they call it auto P, which basically adds paragraphs and line breaks and can sometimes make the code look ugly. So what we'll do is we'll create some additional widget areas, and then we'll create our own widgets that will allow us to create a form field area to be able to supply the text content for those widgets, but it will wrap it in the codes and style classes and IDs that we want for our elements, so that we can essentially move all this stuff around at will. So maybe we'll just make all these areas widgetized areas in the website, and we'll just reference maybe the upper content widget area, or we'll reference a pricing widget, maybe even just call this our testimonials widget. Down here we can call this partners widget or something of that reference. So I think that'll be the next tutorial after this. If anyone has any questions, feel free to add your questions in the comments, and I will respond when I can. Thanks.